So MongoDB is set up. Now it's time to make sure we can interact with this database. For that, attached to this lecture, you can find this code. Make sure to download it and run npm install. And as you can see, it's a really basic Node Express application, you could say. If we run npm start, we again got a development server. I'll quit this process now as we don't need it for the moment. And as we can see, we want to send a post request here to /products or a get request also to /products. So in the end, we want to make sure that if we send a post request that a new product is stored in our database, or if we send a get request that we get all the products stored in our database. In the MongoDB terminology, this would mean we want to store a document, so each product would be a document in our collection with post, and get would mean simply give me all the documents stored in a specific collection. We'll dive deeper into that throughout this module. Now the idea is that the MongoDB logic, so the logic related to the connection to MongoDB, is outsourced to a separate file. We'll create this file soon, and that we then simply refer to this file here as part of our methods as a separate argument. Therefore, let's get started with creating this file, and we can simply name this MongoJS maybe. And what I want to do in this file, or the logic I need in this file, is actually quite straightforward. First, I want to create a constant here, which could be called createProduct. This would be the constant related to our post request that we send to our server. And this will be an asynchronous task. I can tell you this already, because if you're working with databases here, these tasks, for example, storing new data or fetching data, can take a moment. Therefore, these are always asynchronous operations here. So we'll add async, and we have a request, a response, and next. And we will have a second constant. This will be our, well, maybe get products. Again, an asynchronous task here. Then we're going to need this logic in here in our app.js file, as I said, for the post and get request as an argument. Therefore, we can already export our functions with exports.createProduct being equal to createProduct, and with exports.getProducts equal to getProducts. So now we'll be able to reference these functions from inside other files. I'll come back to app.js soon though, so let's focus onto the MongoJS file now. And if we now focus onto our logic, maybe for createProduct here, then we need the code to create the product, so the core logic. But before we do so, we need to establish a connection to MongoDB. And to do that, we first need to install it. Therefore, let's run npm install --save MongoDB. So we now installed MongoDB, and in case you're wondering how I knew this command, if you go to the official docs now, a link is attached to this lecture, you can select the specific driver you're using MongoDB with. So you could also use it with Python, for example, or Java. We are using Node.js here, so you can select Node.js. And if you now go to installation, you can see the command to install MongoDB is this one right here. Just to be precise at this stage, just to avoid confusion, you don't install the database, of course, you only install the driver. So an SDK, which allows you to interact with the database. The next thing we need is we need to use the so-called Mongo client. The Mongo client will simply help us to create a new Mongo client instance in the end. So basically to make sure we can connect to a specific server. This means we have to import it. So we create another constant named Mongo client, which is equal to require MongoDB. And very important, we refer to the Mongo client class right here. What we need next though is we need to specify which MongoDB server we want to connect to. And for that, we have to go back to MongoDB Atlas. And here we are now in our cluster that we created. We can select connect. And here we have different methods to connect to our MongoDB server. In our case, we want to connect through our application. So we click here. Our driver version is Node.js 3.0 and later. This is fine. And here we can now see our connection string. And we have to copy this string. And now we can create a new constant named URL. And here we now simply copy paste this connection string. In this string, you see you have three interesting fields though. The first one is this menu. That's the name of the user I just created. Then we have to provide the password. And then we have this test part right here. Well, the password is quite straightforward, I would say. This is just the password that we created when we created the new user. This was this menu user here. Here I just paste the password I created previously. And the last step in our connection string is this part right here, this test. This is the default name for the so-called database. So we have the database, which contains the collection, which then contain the single documents, in our case, the single places. And we can give this a new name, maybe places test. Not the most creative name, but I guess it's fine for our purposes. With that, we now added the Mongo client and have our URL. So theoretically, we would be able to interact with our database now. What's missing though, of course, is the logic to create the product. Let's continue with this now.